Welcome to the show. And you are a wonderful explorer, and you've been to Antarctica, and you've written many, many books. And, speaking at the conferences around everywhere. And so you're probably a pretty familiar face at this point. Do you want to add anything to that? You also publish other people's books, right?
Yeah. I published Michael Jaco's books, Laura Eisenhower, Leo Lyons-Agami, and many other in the esoteric field. And hey, if you didn't publish your own books, Carrie, it'd probably pick you up too. We're
Maybe I
talking
should
about
have,
Mark
after
Richards
all
as
the trouble
well.
I had. Okay, so now let's just jump into it and hope for the best. This is recording, as I said, on Zoom, and it looks like we are streaming live, so this should all be good. So let's talk about, first of all, why have you decided to kind of dive back into Antarctica? What has propelled you in this direction?
Mm. Well, of course, you know that I went down there about 7 years ago and just was absolutely fascinated with Antarctica and all things about it. It seemed like the more questions I had, peeling the layers off the onion, the deeper the riddle became. So, not long after I got back from the trip, I wrote my first conference presentation about Antarctica, which I've been speaking at for 6 years. And all the while, collecting information and putting it into book form. And Secrets of Antarctica, The Untold History of the Ice Continent is coming out at the end of this year. In fact, it's just shipping from the printer this week, but the ebook version is now available on CCC Publishing and Amazon as a Kindle ebook.
Oh, great. Okay, so let's dive in then and see where we go. I know I'll just kind of let you take the reins, and then I'll pepper you with questions along the way.
Yeah, sure. Well, as we both know, you have done a lot of work with Captain Mark Richards. And actually, the very first time you and I met at the UFO Mega Conference, you were interviewing John Lear, who's actually since passed away. I was also in communication with John Lear before he passed, and he was explaining to me the concept of micronations. And micronations are like the Vatican City. It's an independent entity within the city of Rome in the country of Italy, but it acts in its own behalf. And when I was down in South America on my way to and from Antarctica, I was down there for a full 4 months. I was coming across some of these micronations, not able to go into them. They're very much off limits, but they are run by Germans. And after World War II, a whole lot of money got taken out of Europe. Many metric tons of gold are confirmed gone, lost, exiting the country, because the Germans, keep in mind, in World War II, they had captured all the central banks of Holland, Belgium, France, as well as Poland and several Eastern European nations. So they were extraordinarily wealthy, as well as some of the priceless artifacts, which have also gone missing and have still never turned up, including the Spear of Destiny, which I mention in my book because it was an absolute fascination with Hitler, and the SS were collecting all this stuff, just like the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they're going after the Ark of the Covenant in Egypt. They were doing all kinds of those kind of excavations. And so a lot of this stuff ties into Antarctica, as well as these micronations in South America. This is the birth of the Fourth Reich. And it was basically an intelligence organization. They lost their military might, but they literally went underground with some of these underground bases that they had built in Argentina and Chile, as well as Brazil, where also above ground, these micronations took place. And in Mark Richards' book, which I'll definitely have to get you. This is the only copy I got, which I bought at the UFO MegaCon.
Well,
Joanne Richards.
I may, I have it. I was sent these ebooks a while ago, but
Okay.
I'm not the most organized person. And since Joanne and Mark split up, the EDH website is sort of in limbo, and we are supposed to try to take it over and, actually give him another website, because she won't give away that one, I don't think. But what happens is then we'll mount all the books and then possibly put them on sale again, but then we have to work out the logistics, because prisoners are not supposed to earn money or have a business. They can earn, I think they can earn royalties or something like that. So there's some kind of work out there. So just so you know, I have had them in the past, and I will have them in the future. So you don't have to worry. But go ahead.
Well, this is a fascinating treaty on Operation High Jump. And he says 1947 and after. So, of course, Operation High Jump started in 46, but it was over early in 1947. Because what he writes about in the book is how the entire objective of Operation High Jump at the helm of Admiral Richard E. Byrd was to go down there to find this base 211 that they had set up before World War II and were still operating and active out of after the war, because a lot of materiel went down there in ships and U-boats, and even sometimes in planes. They would bring down hundreds, perhaps thousands of personnel. And so they knew about this, including the British in Operation Tamerlane. And the area of Antarctica that I went to on a sailboat, the Palmer Peninsula, we went to two former British bases, Port Lockroy and another one at the Vernansky base, which is now a Ukrainian base, but was British, where they were spying on the Germans the whole time. And they're picking up their transmissions from the boats and the U-boats as they were bringing all this stuff down there. So they passed on this information to the Allies, who were, of course, together in World War II. And then as soon as the U.S. could mount an expedition, as fast as they could go, the first Antarctic summer, Admiral Byrd was assigned to lead the armada of ships. And he gave a press release, spoke to the media right before he left. And the only thing he would say is that it was military in nature. Okay, and they're going down there with a huge force of fighting men, of ships, destroyers, aircraft carrier, or even a submarine, to do something down there. They said it was to go, the official cover story was to practice in cold Arctic conditions, but you could go up to Canada to do that, right? Why do you have to go all the way down to Antarctica? So there's so many things about Operation High Jump, especially that Mark Richards wrote about in this treaty. And it's very much like a military style document. You can see my highlighting in here. This is just such credible information that
That's great to know.
I was using in my book.
I will say that, Project Camelot was involved years ago with New Berlin, which is what they called the city and the underground base down there that the Germans were occupying. So there was a man who supposedly escaped, and he had a sort of a book, and he brought it to MUFON of Germany, I think it was, and they were afraid to death to touch it. So they gave it to us. And it turned out that the guy was kind of halfway out of his mind. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think it had to be translated from German into English, as I recall. But at any rate, we posted it on our website, although I don't know that it's there anymore. And this is the kind of thing that goes on with Camelot. Things get attacked and disappear. But I can look for it again. It was difficult to deal with. And we did get a communication with the guy himself briefly, or I did, sort of maybe a year after they gave us the book. And and nobody did anything about the book. Nobody said anything. Nobody tried to help with the book, etc. But he came forward and said that he was being chased and under attack, and that he was very afraid, and that he also supposedly had some kind of mental issues as a result of being sort of locked up in the New Berlin base, because he was, that's why he escaped. He got captured and so on. So then they tried to basically discredit the guy. But I think it was a real story. There was an authenticity to it and to his voice when he was talking about it. But that's a small sliver of what we experienced in regard to that.
Oh, I'd love to see that document if you can ever come up with it.
Sure.
Please pass it on.
Yeah,
and you mentioned
it was
New
on our
Berlin
site
base.
forever, for a really long time. But we're talking going back, I don't know. Well, it's not 20 years, but it's probably more like 10 years at least.
Because you mentioned New Berlin base, and that is different than Point 211 or Base 211,
Well,
which was the
for
initial base that the Nazis set up in the late 1930s near the Schumacher Pond. So they had landed a seaplane in these lakes that never freeze because they're heated with geothermal activity. And I suppose that's why they chose this area, because they call it a Antarctic oasis. And so Schumacher was the pilot of the plane. He stayed with the plane and did water samples and found that the water was hotter as you go deeper. Usually with a thermocline, it's the other way around, proving that they're heated with geothermal heat. While the crew went out and they founded this Base 211. And some of the information I got about that, Carrie, was they were given a defunct base, an empty base by the reptilians who were working with the Germans in World War II. I mean, this is where it gets kind of deep as far as what's really going on under the ice in Antarctica. But they could have easily adapted to a defunct base.
Sure. Well, when one says the reptilians, that can cover a lot of different races, one of which is the beings from Aldebaran, who are actually reptilian hybrids, humanoid hybrids. And they are the ones that brought all the information to Maria Orsich about building the UFOs and put them actually ahead of everyone technologically on planet Earth at that time. And they were told during World War II that some of the tech they were given, they could not use then. They'd have to use it in the future. The idea being that they may be going to use it now or around now. And that, so they held off in terms of overtly winning World War II. But now, the more we look into Project Paperclip and what went on during those hearings, it does appear that lots of Nazis escaped, were brought over to countries like the United States, England, Russia, and certainly down to Antarctica, and that Hitler was still alive, and that I think the consensus is that he lived out his life in Antarctica.
Yeah.
I mean, not Antarctica, Argentina.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then we went to not only La Falda, that had the Eden Hotel, that had pictures of him after the war, which I reprinted in my book, but also down in Bariloche, the Inelco house. There was a great series that came out on the History Channel a couple years ago called Hunting Hitler, and it went for 3 seasons, so about 36 or 40 episodes. And it went to a lot of these places. Some of them are close to these micronations where the Germans continued to operate. And so as it pertains to Operation High Jump and the New Berlin base, that was a different one. That was well below the ice, and Mark Richard describes it as a science city. And he said this was the objective of the Allies in Operation High Jump. 1, to capture a disc, and 2, to destroy the science city. They did neither, and they got their ass whooped and had to get out of there in short order. But Mark Richards points out in this Operation High Jump manual that they realized when they called off High Jump that they had left the Science City intact and they were continuing their backward engineering operations. And you mentioned the Vril women with Maria Orsich. That was right after World War One. So we're talking about in 1918 or 1919, they started. So they already had several decades to work on this stuff. And the very famous scientist, Victor Schauenberger, he was looking over the shoulder of the Vril women as they were interpreting and getting their telepathic readings. And he said, this is actionable intelligence. We can take this into the laboratory and reproduce it and use this for our own dish-shaped craft. So they were, as you said, well high above the intelligence or the scientific quota of the rest of the world by so many.
Plug to my computer. Very sorry. Keep talking.
Well, just that I get into the Vril Society as well as the Thule Society and then the Ananurbe Society, which was going to Tibet and many countries around the world, but especially Tibet. So that movie, 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt, that was based on Ernst Schaefer, who was the lead in the last Tibetan excursion. He came back to Germany in 1938, and immediately they had set up the first expedition to Antarctica on the ship called Schwabenland. And then they named the area New Schwabenland. And so something that Ernst Schaefer had brought out of Tibet could have tipped them off on how to find this defunct base that the Germans were perfectly adaptable at refurbishing to make their own base 211. But the New Berlin base, which the majority of the population went to, that was well deep into Antarctica. And I show pictures of what Antarctica would look like without the ice. And there are long fjords and waterways. If you know where you're going, you can get all the way to close to within 100 miles of the South Pole. And that's where the giant hole in the ice is supposed to be. So you have not only ways to go in flying crafts through the hole, but U-boat routes under the ice. And so right after World War II, when Berlin fell, the Soviets were the first to get to Berlin. And so they got the lion's share of all the intelligence that came out of the Army, the Kriegsmarine, the Navy, as well as the Ananurbe Society. And so there's this guy called Nikolai Sabotin, who is now starting to come out with these maps and this other information he got at the fall of the Soviet Union. So at the end of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, if you showed up in Moscow with a suitcase full of hard currency other than rubles, there were people that would go into the KGB and, what are you looking for? Oh, how about an alien autopsy video? Okay, here you are. How about a crashed UFO? Yep, we got that too. And now those are all on the internet. But they were also selling Antarctica maps and diagrams and notebooks of some of the high Nazi commanders who were talking about how they would recruit young orphaned men to go down there as a one-way trip, as well as some of these incredible maps that show the U-boat routes to get to the New Berlin base. And I believe that was the one and the same with what Admiral Byrd discovered on his second flight to the South Pole when he went in and described it in his diary, which was called the Domain of the Ariani. And it was human-like, but not quite human. I think they were probably tall Nordics that lived down there. But he was escorted with flugelrods or UFOs, wingtip to wingtip, took over control of his plane and set him down like a helicopter. And he said that there was Nazi insignia on those flugelrods. So I think that the Germans had adapted with this Agarthan under earth, inner earth empire. Now, we're not even talking about hollow earth or well deep into the mantle. But what we're talking about is just below the 2 miles of the polar plateau on the continental level.
Okay, so just decided to do a search here on my website to see what's left of this situation here. And yeah, so the person's name was Barabu Veda. And I guess some of this stuff is here, but I haven't actually seen the document lately. So the picture of the document is missing. So I'm just looking while we're on the show here. Didn't get a chance to, I'm looking for the actual document, which is typical. There is some information on my website, so I can clean that up. This is typical that, which our website was over the last 20 years attacked so many times that someone actually, they have auto things that go through and look for broken links, and they found thousands of them, literally. Wow. And so far, my webmaster doesn't have the time or the inclination to want to fix those links, but I don't even know how long it would take. But every time someone talks about something, then I have to go and dig and find if it even exists. If it's there, then I have to search for the documentation or the video that went with it. So that's what goes on there. But sorry, because it's just so gigantic. It has over 6,000 pages on our website. So this is, a job for somebody who's like a really, has the mentality of sort of a researcher on the one hand and a library on the other. If you want to volunteer, write to Carrie at projectcamelot.tv, and maybe we can bring you on board to do just that. Okay, so back to this story. So there's a lot of pieces, right? They're like independent of each other. Now, I have an interview with that actually is pretty recent, and I don't know if you remember, because I think it did send it to you. It is from an individual who is, his name was Hendricks, and he went on a plane to the North Pole and was flown over a hole and then flown into the hole by this man who I guess was sort of in on the deep state secret space program. For some reason, they gave him permission to let this guy in. He said he saw, what they say, like, sort of jungle and hot atmosphere. And there were sort of indigenous peoples there, and they were tall, and he even was fed some food. Now, I don't know whether they take a person and they give them, sort of implants, memory implants that are not accurate, or if he really did experience all this. He's a lovely man. I put the video out, I think it was about a year ago. Some people may have seen it. Again, that's on my website as well. If you look under the first name Hendricks, you should find it. But that is the North Pole. But this individual Johnson, I don't know if you're planning to talk about this video that was made by this older man called Johnson. Were you planning to go in that direction?
We could, sure.
Well, because in his discussion, he says exactly the same thing as Hendricks says about what he saw and what was really there. And so the idea here is that there are lands. I don't know if you go down the fjords, like you call it, or how you get there, or you go through a frequency fence, but there's a whole other civilization. There's land, there's even a sea, or more than one sea. In other words, this gets into where people think it's a flat earth and all that kind of thing. I don't think it's that, but I think it may be dimensional. So, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of stuff that we can't necessarily prove, but this man, his last name is Johnson. Now he's quite elderly in the video that we saw a clip. And then there's a whole longer video that I found that also goes into some of the stuff. But there's no doubt about it. He was a very young man, I think something like 19 years old or something, when he originally joined Byrd on his expeditions. And he said he knew about the secrecy and knew about, all these different things going on. So I just wanted to bring that up so we didn't forget. And I also wanted to bring this Baraboo Veda's information. And we did get some of it sort of put into text in English, but I have to look for the ebook.
Mm. Yeah, Johnson was the last living survivor of Operation High Jump. And it was kind of a deathbed confession when he started to reveal what he knew and saw down there and how it was all top secret, and everybody who was involved in Operation High Jump had to take a non-disclosure agreement and basically for life and never reveal what they saw and did down there. So it's great that just towards the end of his life, he started to discuss what he saw and what he did. And he would always say what a great man Admiral Byrd was, how admirable he was, and such a brave soldier, too, to do everything he did. I have a whole chapter on Admiral Byrd in my new book, because just really one of the greatest explorers in humankind to go down there and do all this. And then his son published his diary, it's called The Missing Diary of Admiral Byrd. And after he passed, because Byrd was a man of his word and a military man, and he even says in the end of his diary that he was told that he's a military guy, he's to take orders, and he was never to reveal what he saw down there. And his son was actually accompanying him on Operation High Jump. His son was also a Navy officer. And so 40 years later, his son was on a train to Washington, D.C. from Boston, where they come from, and he went missing. He was going to give the keynote speech. They were going to talk about Operation High Jump, but he never made it. And a month later, he was found dead in a Baltimore warehouse with a different set of clothes on that he was wearing when he was on the train, the last witnesses. And he never gave that speech. And he died 68 years old, exactly the same age that his father did. And his father, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, he gave this interview with Longines Watch Company just a few months before he died. And you can tell he's a very healthy guy, great shape. And then he dies mysteriously in his bed of a heart attack. Think heart attack gun. They got to him just like they got to James Forrestal, who's been called the first casualty of the UFO cover-up. And James Forrestal was good friends with Richard E. Byrd. And I've got a picture of them meeting when they came back from Operation High Jump in the book. And James Forrestal also met a very untimely death, was suicided out of Bethesda Hospital. And before that happened, he was going up and down the hallways of the Pentagon saying, there's Nazis down in Antarctica and they got flying saucers and we're all screwed and we got to do something about this. So then they committed him to Bethesda, and he was talking to the staff there too. And then, of course, he was dead weeks later.
Yeah, and they threw him out a window, actually. Yeah. So that was huge, because one of the things they also did was to put out the rumor that he was crazy.
Right.
And that's something they often do, you know. So I think that's, they're still messing with UFO people that have information, good information, and even to this day. And I've been talking about that on recent interviews, how they're treating whistleblowers with sort of different standards, that certain ones are given a pat on the head and given some help and like given video and have books written about themselves and so on and so forth. And other ones have their lives ruined. And so I think that's very important to look at the double standard that our military treats some of these people with. And, I mean, I just went on a warpath today, just with a lot of information from this chief of police person who I interviewed. And all that's out there right now on my Telegram. So if you're interested on that, just wanting to say that secrecy is the name of the game. And when you're trying to dig into any of these things, you can put your life in danger. And I want to let you go ahead if you have more on your agenda to go through. But at some point, just remind me, I want to bring up the Wano Sabin piece of interaction a year or so ago.
Well, just to say, too, what they did to Captain Mark Richards, he's still sitting in jail, right?
Yeah, but I mean, his is much bigger, the tragedy, and it's 38 years of his life. And I do have a very specific high-level witness who has been to Antarctica and has verified some things to me.
Well, do tell.
Well, that's all I can say. Other than, I mean, he's not saying there's a flat earth or anything like that. But I think that, see, you're calling it Agartha, and that is actually the name of what is supposed to be a Tibetan site that is the entrance of which is in the Himalaya.
Right.
And I don't mean to get sort of spooky on you, but I have been there. So in out of body, especially when I went through a certain acupuncture, I don't know if you remember when I got injured with a scalar weapon on the side of the head because I was interviewing a whistleblower, so-and-so. There's a whole saga about that. And I went for healing to go to an acupuncture. And every time when she did the acupuncture on my face, then I would leave my body and go to what is in essence, Agartha. It has many names. Yeah.
Shangri-La, Shambhala.
Yes, all of that. Shambhala is more the name I know, but I know that it has been referred to as Agartha. And anyway, so just saying.
Well, I do reprint a map of inner Earth in the chapter in my book that does call it the civilization of Agartha. So I take that to mean that there are more than one location, that there could very well
Possibly, yes. And I can say that the Radu Sinamar set of books, which there were 5 last time I knew about them. There may be more now because they don't always translate them right into English after he writes them. They're Romanian. It's all about the underground going in through the Romanian Sphinx. And that is also going into inner Earth through a frequency fence and tunnels. Mm-hmm. And they take you to these places. And it looks like Saddam Hussein had found an entrance to one of these tunnels where this is when they decided they had to get rid of him and also during the Iraq War. He tried to secret away, or they did, museum pieces that were, I guess, very precious. And they said that the museum was sacked, which was, they sacked it. It wasn't that it was sacked by soldiers or random rioters or something like that. It was actually, they took those things. And what the thing was that Saddam actually thought he was an Anunnaki back in history. I forget the guy's name.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes. And so he firmly believed that. And he was opening a portal into that area for the Anunnaki to come and go. So, of course, the U.S. military decided he had to go.
So, Michael Jaco, he he was a Navy SEAL, and he was over there in Iraq when they caught Saddam. Wasn't there actually at the spot where they caught Saddam, but he was there, part of the team. And he was saying that, remember during the Gulf War, the second Gulf War, when we went in, and like you said, the very first thing they did was they went to the Museum of Antiquities. Well, you'd think they'd go to the military bases or the radio station or the palace, the first thing, but no, they go to the museum. It's like going to our Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
Where they
as the
also
first thing, the most important thing to capture first. And I said,
they
well, why do
hide
you
a lot
suppose
of
they
stuff
did that?
even today.
And so Michael Jaco told me this, that Saddam had found a very ancient Stargate, the one that
It's a
rotates at
portal.
very fast
Yeah,
rates, and they were able to get it going. That's why he was such a danger.
right.
And the Museum of Antiquities was built on top of an ancient cave, and that's where the Stargate was found.
Yes, that's
So
where
the
the portal.
museum was kind of like a cover,
So
just with all these
Stargate is
other
the same
artifacts.
word for portal. You know that Stargate
Yep.
is the man-made sort of entrance that they put in front of a portal and create actually the opening and the wormhole, make the connection to a wormhole.
So
So
Saddam started working with it and started to get it to work and putting his cosmonauts or whatever you want to call them going through time and able to plant people in different places. And of course, you can change the outcome of certain historical events. Of course, our CIA found out about it and they said, we got to put an end to it. And according to Jaco, this is the real reason why we went in to Iraq the second
yes,
time
well,
to
I would
capture
say
that.
that, and I did say that back in the day also, just for what it's worth.
You're on the tip, Carrie. You know
No,
it.
well, I mean, I'm just saying Camelot would have this kind of information, but it was
Right.
substantiated by this journalist in Romania who got to a very high level with their own secret space program run by a guy called Caesar, who had a special this kind of placenta type birth and had some special abilities and powers. And the inner earth civilizations went to him and showed him sort of how to go into these different inner earth civilizations and make contact. Since then, by the way, we are in contact. Our secret space program is in contact with at least one inner earth civilization. And so they used to try to keep their distance from us. But what I heard, this was a couple of years ago through a source, that they had actually made contact with the secret space program. So they were and maybe are having help from this sector.
Mm. And of course, when you consider how advanced the Germans were with their technology for 100 years, and their first secret space program was called the Nachtwaffen, the Dark Fleet, which is also a name reptilians use, working in conjunction, I suppose. When our first astronauts went around the moon on the Apollo missions, on the dark side of the moon, they saw a base in the shape of a swastika. And that too was an adapted base of the Nazis, who then put swastika on there. But it was also a reptilian base. I understand that if history were really to tell the truth, the first man to walk on the moon were the Germans decades before we did in '69.
Yeah, that's probably perfectly true. I will say that we walked on the moon a lot sooner than probably they let us know, but William Tompkins really goes into that in depth and talks about how the Nazis basically were in competition with the Pleiadians over our secret space program and what they would allow to happen, and they were sabotaging it all the time through it. And the idea, I was just talking about this yesterday, I think, when it seems that they have taken it over. If you ask Courtney Brown and his remote viewers, he says they are shooting down the good guys. That's what he says. And his remote viewers, have seen this. So that's a really interesting take on things. I was also talking to somebody, I guess it might have been Rob, the typical skeptic guy. Yesterday, I was on an interview about it. But anyway, he's talking about knowing someone who's been tracking the building of all these databases, centers, that one of which is going to be in Texas. You've heard about it, called, Project Stargate, which is probably no accident. But what they actually, I think, are doing is they're competing with the underground databases that we already have. Right. So understanding what is really going on with the Trump and the Space Force, and the fact that I think they're trying to get along with those people that are running this secret space program, but I think they're mainly they're under the gun because it's run by reptilians. They're lying about everything, so they're covering up everything. So I only know some of this through whistleblowers and my own intuition and things that I can put together because I have a history that makes it easy for me to hear a piece of information and know how it fits, right? And I'm sure you're like that by now too.
Yeah. Well, we're both researchers, Carrie, so we're accumulating data points and trying to make sense of some of these very intricate subjects. As I say on the back cover of my new book, Secrets of Antarctica, all roads lead to Antarctica. Of course, no roads lead there, but that's what the parable is that you get all the answers when you find what the heck's going on down there, and especially what the Germans were up to and how they're, as Captain Mark Richards said, how their science city was left untouched. They couldn't get to it. They couldn't destroy it. That was the whole point of Operation High Jump, and they didn't get one of the UFOs. Now, Captain Mark Richards, he was saying that they did do a compromise with the Antarctica Germans after the flyover of Washington, D.C., which I'm sure Admiral Byrd knew exactly what those were, the enemy that can fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. And according to the whistleblower that Laura Eisenhower is working with that knew her dad's administration, Dwight D. Eisenhower, great-grandfather, I should say, that Dan Cooper said that the point of that flyover was to get the American military to stand down, that they didn't want to have another high jump. And one of the negotiation points was our military, as you know, is just so hungry for technology that they made a deal with them and said, you give us one of these UFOs then. And so the last trip that Admiral Byrd did down there, called Operation Deep Freeze, his fifth excursion to Antarctica, that Captain Mark Richards was saying they landed a disc on one of the carriers that just took off. And then that was it. So then we were kind of in this unsteady alliance with the Antarctica Germans. They had the technology that we wanted. We knew they were down there, but neither side could reveal the other. Because if we did go down there with another force to take them out, which could have been what Operation Argus was all about when they nuked around Antarctica in 1958. And then you have the beginning of the Antarctica Treaty, which I think was the Antarctica Germans saying, hands off, don't come down here. We got no fly zones. You can't go to the hole in the ice. You can't even do any of this underwater stuff. And then that kind of makes a lot of sense with what that was all about.
But there's more to that story.
Of course, there's always more.
It's not in that book. I just have to say that you may know of this story, but I've talked about it from time to time and written about it. But so this is the thing. There's a dynamic that goes on with every election of a new president. Someone from the administration, in this case, last time it was Bob Kerry. Is that his name? No. What is it?
John Kerry.
John Kerry. So John Kerry was the one that went down. They have to go down and report to Antarctica. And back in the time of John F. Kennedy, it was Fletcher Prouty who did that. So this is a pattern that you can actually see. And then again, this gets into this thing with, I'll just say it now, where recently, a year ago or so, 107, he even had photographs on the way down to Antarctica. And then when he was there, I guess just of ice, nothing, you can see anything. But he actually went by ship, I guess at least a good part of the way. And he was part of a meeting. Now, a remote viewer reported to me about the meeting, said that, and I heard from a back channel that there were 100 people from around the world. Some were on the light side, some were on the dark side. They all came and sat around this big round table and were, I guess, lectured to by an AI which may have been the one coming from what is Betelgeuse, actually, that has since been broke. That connection has been broken, and that's a whole nother drama. So I know all these, like, it's kind of like jumping around. I know these sporadic stories, but I don't know the through story. So what happened though with Juan is that he never reported what went on down there, other than we heard there was 100 people chosen to come down there. My remote viewer said they also had a Nephilim who came out, like, I don't know if it was like a hologram out of the ground, where the people saw it, but it was somehow in attendance. There was a Nephilim, and that the AI communicator was actually coming from off planet. And the information that I've had is that each planet is controlled by an AI. And in this case, Earth was being controlled from Betelgeuse. And then this is a year or two ago, there was an interference, and I wrote about it and talked about it at the time. People may or may not remember. And other people have mentioned it. I think Richard Allen Miller even mentioned it recently. He was sort of on that because I had my attention on it for many months and years. But basically, what happened was there was it was probably a planetoid or some kind of gigantic craft that went in front of Betelgeuse and broke the connection between Earth and Betelgeuse, such that the AI lost its control of Earth at that time. And the control was, I think, transferred to Mars. And Mars and Earth are controlled by the same AI. This is the information I was getting. Whether it's all true, or not, whatever you want to go with it. But this is the kind of thing that has been coming through. So Antarctica is not, there's other things. I have a book, and I've talked about it before. There's an author who's actually, he wrote a fiction book, but it turned out that it was real. It was true. And it was all about what they're finding under the ice and in areas that are not under ice, having to do with the ancient civilization of Atlantis that has shifted down through the centuries of earth changes or whatever it was. And that was the last time when humans and aliens walked together on Earth in a semi-peaceful way. That's one of the reasons they're so fascinated to keep going down there and keep digging and finding out more information.
And I have a dozen satellite and Google Earth images in my book of city grids, of pyramids, of all kinds of things, even the scans under the ice showing city grid patterns. So I agree with you that it's a very good chance that at least one of the colonies of Atlantis shifted down in Western Antarctica, because Antarctica is very old ancient landmass. So it was part of Pangaea. That's called Eastern Antarctica. That broke off from India, Australia, Madagascar to its present position. And then West Antarctica came right down the mid-Atlantic ridge. And that's where they connected at the end of the last pole shift. So it's quite plausible that there was a colony of Atlantis before Antarctica was covered in the ice. And Dr. Michael Sala actually provided me with some GPS coordinates that I've reproduced in the book too, that are of this city grid nature.
Okay, very good. Well, I should get you to look at this book that Fiction is Fact. I was read about it. What happened, it was revealed that he published the book in, I guess, paperback and then as an ebook. And so what they did is they disappeared the paperback. So it only exists as an ebook. And I don't even know if it's still there, but when I found out about it, and Linda Moulton Howe has had several witnesses who've worked down in Antarctica. I don't know if you know that.
I've spoken to Brian S.
Okay. And so, so bits and pieces of information, you can take it all together and sort of make a picture of what's going on. I say, and I don't know if anyone else does, that Antarctica, I believe that the ant beings control it or have controlled it in the past.
Like insectoid?
Pass.
Yeah. Well, of course, the Hopis say that they encountered the ant people on the Colorado Plateau, right in our Four Corners region of North America. They always describe them as ant beings too. So we
Right.
could have interterrestrials
That's
of an insectoid nature.
Yes, definitely. Well, we do, but also my interaction with the Hopi is that I was told secretly, but I've disclosed it, is that they worship and are run by a reptilian. Their god is a reptilian. So these are not angels, okay? A lot of people think indigenous people are, oh, they're all so perfect and everything. They're not actually.
Well, remember the biggest secret the devil played on humans was to make us not believe he exists.
Right.
And so I think there's a connection between the devil and demons all living underground and in a hell-like scape with reptilians and gray aliens.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, we could talk for 5 hours, I'm sure, on all of this. But did you have more about Johnson's story? Because I think that you were looking into that when you were communicating with me, and Tyler, who I think is going to do a later interview with you at some point, also wanted to talk about that. So any thoughts?
Yeah, well, Johnson has since passed away. But Rex Bear, who does the Leak Project, he and I have done several interviews together too.
Oh, okay.
He was among the last people to interview Johnson, and he also spoke of the secrecy involved. And then we have this new whistleblower guy. I think I shared you this video.
Yes.
Is it okay if I play it? It's just about
Absolutely.
a minute and 30 seconds.
This wind in his back
I think it cut out.
into the inside of this planet. Not a molten core. Far from it. Continental shelves bigger than on the surface. Seas that were equal to ours. And he took 300 photographs and brought them back, and I tried to see them, and Franklin Birch, who was at the National Archives, would not let me in. Oh, I got in the cage, but I couldn't look at anything. Caldwell found those records and read them in 1940, and he took his round-wing plane in and went right through the Earth and came out at the South Pole in a 125-mile opening there. That's one thing he did. I told you that was 1940. That was a great accomplishment of the round-wing plane at that point. We hadn't had to fight a war. We hadn't had to do anything. 1952, I hesitate to tell you. I've had 3 attempts on my life, and I don't know if I'll walk away from this meeting if I say any more. I've had the needle, I've been poisoned, and I've had people sent to kill me. Honestly, ladies and
In
gentlemen.
1952, that was it. 1952 is the year of the flyover of the Capitol. And the big secret there is that we acquiesced to the Antarctica Germans. They had the technology. We wanted it, and we couldn't get it in Operation High Jump. We couldn't destroy their Science City, so we made a compromise with them. That's why this is the untold history. A lot of my new book is the history that hasn't been told, and that is how the Germans were getting these artifacts from around the world, going inner Earth in Tibet and also in Antarctica, and building their micronations in South America and Antarctica, and basically fanning the flames of discontent between the NATO countries and the Soviet bloc. All the while, they've been behind the scenes. The Antarctic Germans never surrendered. The Third Reich never surrendered, nor did the SS, the elite corps who was involved in all this stuff. They just went underground with all this stuff. And I suppose, he says his life was in danger talking about this. I'm half German myself, half German, half Norwegian, and I've got a great love for the German people. And I'm going to Germany next year and speaking at a conference and presenting all this information. And, I'd like to go back to Antarctica and I meet with the master like Admiral Byrd did and just
Oh,
maybe
right. Yeah,
be the
there's
ones who basically say, hey, it's okay. We know you're down there. We've known it for a long time, but it's now time to go mainstream with all this.
right. Well, there's more to the story having to do with the beings from Aldebaran that seem to, I asked, I forget who I asked this, but I asked someone about why did they choose the German people? And they said because they were the most like them and they were the most developed, that they thought they were the ones that could handle their new technology. Turns out they were probably right. I also have some German background. And I have to say that there is something going on with this because I think I can use this name, but Gordon Duff went on to literally the front page of Veterans Today to talk about this invasion of Africa by the beings from Aldebaran, and that we had sold them land to settle on their sort of culture, and that they come from the star system. I think it's called Aldebaran. I guess more than one planet there. Apparently, the story goes that they destroyed 2 of their planets, and they came to us to make a deal that they would bring their people here, huge populations, given access to Africa, and that is all in a television series called The Event, which I often recommend to people watch, and it's available. You can get it. You can pay for it, I think, on Amazon Prime, and you can also get it some various other places, but it's called The Event. You can look it up. And so what happens is those are, again, reptilian humanoid hybrids. Now, a reptilian humanoid could easily be what the Anunnaki are also, which is they were originally Pleiadians. They went rogue. They went to Nibiru to settle their own planet, and then they were invaded by the Dracos and reptilians, and they're taken over. That's what the Dracos and reptilians do. They try to basically take over a race, infiltrate them genetically, and turn them into them, pretty much, or at least hybrids of them. And so that's what we have going on with the Anunnaki, who are also running Israel. And this is not idle chatter here, because if you listen to Duff's story, which I got confirmation of, by the way, from other whistleblowers who didn't know anything that he had said to me, and it appears that there are countries around Africa that are very unhappy that this land was given to these beings, right? And there's a little suggestion in the event series that their sort of DNA may not mix very well with ours, that they may actually make us sort of sick being in their presence. And believe it or not, this leads to COVID. Part of the reason for COVID is to get people get our atmosphere to be more reptilian, have more radiation, because one of the key components of the whole so-called sickness from COVID is really radiation. So there's all these permutations that link together that if you don't know or follow the through line, that you think they're isolated from each other, but they're not. So this is, for what it's worth, and you can go ahead, Brad, with whatever you'd like to add.
Well, great conversation, Carrie. I always love talking to you. You add so much to everything that we bring to the table here. So, wow, what a great talk. And I just started reading your new book, Total Recall, with Mark Richards. And I'm a big fan of his. And this has been a big, huge help with my research process. So we're definitely on the same page. I'd really like to meet him. If you go back to Vacaville and
well, you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork, but it's doable.
Whatever. I'd love to meet him, especially if we're talking about getting his books republished and bringing back the website.
Right. Well, that was just a thought. I mean, I haven't run it by him. It just occurred to me when I was chatting with you today, because, the ebooks, the one you're lifting up, is actually, you print it and you get it from the website, and it's not packaged into like a book, right? Which
Mhm.
he has some excellent books in this whole compilation of really, a lot of them were sort of more like articles, but some are quite long and some are as long as a book, really a standard book. And so they're great. I mean, he's a wonderful writer, and it goes into great detail about battles that we've had with various ET races, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I have to talk to him about it. We've been trying to, it's not a through line to get to him. Okay. And the important thing to know also is that the reason I always went in person is to get the real story, because when he's online, he doesn't say much of anything.
Yeah.
He's very
Probably being
friendly.
monitored. Yeah.
Yeah. And he tries to, say something, but it's almost impossible to get a straight, very in-depth answer. So it was really valuable that I was there in person for really, I had 12 interviews in a period of 5 years is how it went. About
Amazing.
Once every 6 months I would go. It was a huge amount of work when I did it, but anyway.
Yeah, well, a great net result with your 2-book Kindle ebook set, which I just started reading today, and
Thank you.
I'm already drawn in. I can't wait to get back and start digging into it a lot deeper.
And there's always bits and pieces that I wrote it. I remember it. I've gone over it many times. I've even do videos on it, but I still, you can't keep it all in your head. It's just there's so much information there. And then all of a sudden you find it relates to certain historical happenings as well as things that are happening now. So these things are not idle. Things that are happening now are linked to our past and all of that. So it's very important that we follow these trails, I think, to understand where we are today and even the geopolitical situation going on right now. Why is Israel so, central to the political situation on Earth, really? And why does 3i Atlas have all the markings of being an Anunnaki craft? Which I was one of the first ones to say. And then Sebastian came along and he said he kind of saw more directly reptilians, whereas I see these reptilian humanoid hybrids. But nonetheless, that's a relationship. And some, Anunnaki, people don't know this necessarily, some look reptilian and some look humanoid reptilian. So there's some kind of a interbreeding that went on in terms of genetics with them. And that's true of the temples. When you look at them on the temples, for example, in Iran, a lot of the Anunnaki beings they have even ones with wings that would be related to the Draco. And some are actually looking a lot more reptilian than the ones, say, down in Egypt on the temples down there. So it's really fascinating. We have so much more to learn. And when I go to Egypt, it's really front and center. It's so obvious that there's a great deal that has yet to be uncovered in Egypt. And Mark Richards says that there's tons of stuff under the sands in Egypt that has never been discovered yet. So keep that in mind for the future.
So we got all that going, and conferences, and I'll be seeing you next year at the Alien event down in LA. So we'll have a chance.
I think that's in March.
March.
Yeah, I mean, when you say next year, it really sounds a long way away, but I guess it's not. It's getting closer every day.
Oh, ski season starts Friday. I'm heading up, work my pass in. So
okay, very
we'll
good.
get together in Tahoe like we talked and have that dinner party with the Jacos.
Then I could really learn to ski properly.
Yeah.
Very
Sounds good, Carrie.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me on again. I always love our conversations.
Okay. Well, I won't keep you any longer. I know we've gone on a while. So I'm glad it all worked out. Thank you for being on my show, Brad. If you have anything to add or any links you want to put under the show, that I can put there for people, I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Sounds good. Yeah. It's at bradolsen.com, like my name spelled. And you can find all the conferences I'll be speaking at, including next year. And cccpublishing.com is the publishing website. My books available, Laura Eisenhower, Michael Jaco, and several other authors. So do check out those 2 sites. And You can even get the Secrets of Antarctica ebook right now is available on my
Very good.
website.
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, I sent you PDF version so you
Oh,
can
you did. All right.
start reading that now too.
Okay, very good. All right. Thanks everyone for being here today. And thank you, Brad. Take care.